The most viewed movie of all time. The most viewed movie of all time. The Wizard of Oz was determined to statistically be the single most viewed film that has ever been created in the entire history of this planet's existence. Wow. The Wizard of Oz follows Dorothy, a young girl played by a blatantly older 16-year-old Judy Garland with her tits taped down to look younger, who is pretty much an emo who hates her life because some old bitch wants to dognap her little mutt Toto, so she runs away from home until she's attacked by Hurricane Sandy and flies off to a wonderful land called Oz, where she performs first-class murder on a witch.
That's right.
She's then approached by a good witch who informs her that there's no way home other than the Wizard of Oz granting her that wish. The aforementioned dead witch's sister then shows up and promises revenge just as Dorothy then performs first-class theft and steals some magical ruby slippers. The evil witch then vanishes, promising to return as Dorothy heads off to find the wizard, bumping in a Dick Van Dyke's dad here, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and a really annoying Cowardly Lion.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
We get the classical songs we all know and love as the extra characters seek out a brain, a heart, and some courage from the wizard, as well as sending Dorothy home. They follow up with the second murder, now making Dorothy an official serial killer before getting their wishes granted. Kind of. And Dorothy returning home only to find out that it was all a dream. How come this is the only movie that gets away with that ending? Any other film does that cop-out ending, it was just a dream, and people rip it to shreds. Okay, the sequel proved it wasn't a dream, but that was decades later.
Why didn't you say that in the first place?
The original ending was to actually have the camera pan down to show that Dorothy was still wearing the ruby slippers to prove that it was all real. However, it was cut out thinking the audience would be too sophisticated to have such a hammered in-your-face ending and kept it subtle and left to your interpretation. I always find it weird though that she wakes up and no one seems to remember or care that the old bitch is still coming back to steal her dog.
For 23 years I've been dying to tell you what I thought of you. And now, well, being a Christian woman, I can't say it.
Cunt. She thinks you're a cunt.
Yes.
The movie was based on the L. Frank Baum novel released in the year 1900 and became an incredible success. In 1898, Frank's wife Maud became an aunt to a girl called Dorothy, but she unfortunately passed away just 5 months later. Coming up to finishing his Oz novel, he decided to honor his wife's family by naming his protagonist the exact same name and even giving her the surname of Gale, his wife's maiden name almost identical as Gage. The real Dorothy's grave was actually forgotten about for almost an entire century until 1996 when it was finally rediscovered. Mickey Carroll, one of the only munchkins from the film still alive, learned about it. He replaced her grave with a monument, and the real Dorothy even has her own memorial garden.
Well, that makes a difference.
Development of the film itself, however, began when Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Does it bother nobody else that they misspelled that title? The plural of dwarf is dwarves. Oh, well, fuck you.
It's all right now.
When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs proved that feature-length adaptations of children's stories or fairy tales can actually work. Speaking of which, Snow White was, at the time, the most successful movie ever made, and therefore the screenwriters wanted to surpass it. And, you know, the shitty adaptations that came before it and failed, like my Viagra last night with your mum.
That's true.
In January 1938, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer purchased the rights to the book, but the script itself went through dozens of rewrites. Many writers simultaneously worked on the script on their own, unknowing that others were doing the same, but this was actually quite common practice at the time. In total, the movie was technically written by William H. Cannon, Herman J. Mankiewicz, Noel Langley, Ogden Nash, Harold Arian, Yip Harburg, Florence Ryerson, Edgar Allan Wolfe, Victor Fleming, John Lee Martin, Jack Haley, Burt Lahr, Irving Brecker, Herbert Fields, Arthur Freed, Samuel Hoffenstein, Jack Mint, Sid Silvers, Richard Thorpe, George Cukor, and King Vidor. And my wife still slept with more people.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
The script was finally completed on October the 8th, 1938, and filming began on October 13th in Culver City, California, under the direction of Richard Thorpe. Norman Torrig had filmed a few early tests of the Technicolor shots, but was then quickly replaced. You have got to be pretty shit to be fired after just shooting some demo shots.
Go away.
Judy Garland was quickly selected to play Dorothy, but producer Mervyn Leroy tried his best to get Shirley Temple, who was at the time the biggest child actor around. The producers heard her singing voice and felt like they needed a different style. Deanne Durbin was also considered and had far more acting experience than Garland, and Betty James was also a possibility. Ray Bolger was cast as the Tin Man and Buddy Ebsen as the Scarecrow. Not that one. Bolger wasn't happy with this, however, as he looked up to Fred Stone, who portrayed a Scarecrow performance on stage in 1902, and he wanted to copy his idol. Weirdly, Stone himself actually showed interest in reprising his role for the big screen, and he was actually considered, but then turned down, believing that at age 65, he wouldn't have been as mobile or energetic enough for the part. Ray Bolger did manage to convince Leroy to recast him, and Bolger and Ebsen basically ended up switching roles as the Tin Man and Scarecrow. Ed Wynn was considered for the part of the Wizard. Not that one. But he turned it down as the role was too small for such an incredible actor. The studio ran out of patience negotiating his salary and cast Frank Morgan. W.C. Fields was also another consideration. Fanny Bryce was considered for the part of the Good Witch, as was Beatrice Lilly, but it ended up going to Billy Burke. Gail Sondergaard was originally cast as the Wicked Witch, but soon became unhappy with how horrible she was perceived. Didn't the title of The Wicked Witch kind of give the game away? This was because the character was originally going to be quite sexy. Their words, not mine.
Very good, but very mysterious.
Before they realised that made about as much sense as Lil Wayne continuing his music career, and changed it to the evil cow we all love to hate. In fact, Margaret Hamilton was actually so good at the job, her scenes were often cut down because she was far too scary for child audiences. However, Judy Garland came right out and said that she found it damn near impossible to be afraid of Margaret Hamilton because off-set she was one of the nicest women you could ever meet. You've been a lie! Just 10 days into filming, and Buddy Ebsen suffered a negative reaction to the aluminium makeup he wore as the Tin Man. Breathing it in daily ended up causing some serious damage to his lungs, and he ended up in critical condition in hospital, forcing him to leave the project altogether. No full footage of him as the Tin Man was ever released, but there were some photographs during filming and test pictures of different makeups used. Jack Haley, who took over the role, just naturally assumed that he had been fired. Over the years, Jack Haley has admitted, "People always tell me it must have been fun making The Wizard of Oz. It was not fun. Like hell it was fun. It was a lot of hard work. It was not fun at all." But I guess he should consider himself lucky though. Buddy Ebsen revealed on the Jerry Springer Show many years later that the Tin Man suit almost caused him to cut off his testicles. If only I had a vag.
This is terrible.
Filming was tedious, most of the actors working 6 days a week and as early as 4 and 5 in the morning, not leaving the set until 7 or 8 at night. In addition, the strenuous costumes and makeup sessions caused constant stress. On the set, they would be heated by the studio lights to reach temperatures to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Burt Lahr, who played the Cowardly Lion, had it the worst. It was the heaviest and hottest of all the outfits, and it would be drenched in sweat by the end of the shoot. Crew members were needed to wash it all night, and they confessed that it absolutely reeked. It couldn't have been that bad though, because the original costume itself was actually sold in November 2014 for $3.1 million. People will buy anything. Although, that wasn't the only thing. After filming, Dorothy's iconic ruby slippers were kept by the studio in their extensive collection but soon forgotten about. In 1970, they were discovered again in the basement and were auctioned off for $15,000 by a buyer who then donated them to the Smithsonian Institution in 1979. They're not even the only pair in existence. Another was sold in 2000 for $666,000, unlucky price, and another was stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and have never been found since. The final pair, which weren't even used in the film, was sold by Debbie Reynolds in 2011 for $510,000. And yet, I can't even get anyone to buy my vacuum cleaner. They also learned very quickly the difficulty of working with animals, taking many takes for Toto the dog to follow direction. Awkward little shit. Amazingly, producer Mervyn Leroy actually considered having a human man play Toto. Yeah, that's an idea, mate. That would have been good. The studio also struggled to find many little people to play the Munchkins, and they were each paid over $50 a week, whereas Toto received $125. They were actually a performing group literally called the Singer Midgets. So it's only offensive when I say midgets, right? Filming proved very difficult though, as many of them couldn't sing, and the only ones who could actually speak English are the ones who gave Dorothy flowers. Although, is there any excuses for these nail-on-a-chalkboard voices? So I feel like I can't cover everything about this movie without addressing such a catastrophic issue. Yeah, you know what's coming. It wasn't until the 80s when a story emerged about a certain scene in the movie. As you can see here, it seems quite harmless until you spot this in the background, but even then, it's just a bird, right? Well, yes, that is a bird. Now what you're seeing is the original movie sequence, and it looks dramatically different. This version suddenly blew up a dozen conspiracy theories. There were stories that a Munchkin was depressed when he was in love with another little person who didn't feel the same way, so he couldn't take it anymore before hanging himself on the set right there. This was soon debunked, however, as these scenes were shot before Munchkin Land, so there was no little people even at the studio at the time of filming. Others claim it was a depressed crew member, but the studio strangely replied and claimed that it's a bird, specifically a crane. This is a crane. How is this a damn crane? This is a crane. This is not a crane. Crane, not crane. Can you tell the difference? Crane, not crane. Crane, not crane. Crane, 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 not crane. This is not a crane. Just to clarify, I don't actually believe that it's a hanging corpse. I'm just saying it's not a goddamn crane! This is clearly not a crane, and the re-edited version is blatantly edited to look like a bird. However, it's just ridiculous to believe that someone, Munchkin or not, managed to hang themselves on set in front of cameramen, producers, directors, actors, lighting crew, and then editors, composers, and distributors, and not one single person noticed.
No, it was an accident.
It's most likely some sort of prop that just fell and started swinging, and a reshoot would have been far too expensive to do, so they just settled for it. Strangely, it's not the only weird theory about this flick. Of all people, Pink Floyd were roped in on this one. On their album Dark Side of the Moon, there's many references to the movie, but it goes way beyond that. If you line up their album with the movie, starting with the Lions opening roar at the start, there are many lyrics that identify exactly what is happening in the film at that precise moment. Many think this was intentional, and the band have shrugged it off as ridiculous and completely accidental. But if you want an even eerier coincidence, on June 22nd, 1969, Judy Garland sadly passed away at the age of just 47. On that exact same day, Kansas was disrupted by a tornado. Damn. Filming itself never got any easier, as Margaret Hamilton was severely burned during her very first scene. A hidden elevator was supposed to take a down-out shot to portray her dramatic exit. She claimed it would either go down slowly or really quickly. The first take went fine, but the second one, the timing was inaccurate and she was exposed to the flames. Her makeup caught fire and she was rushed off for medical care. She spent 6 weeks in hospital before returning to filming. Judy Garland seemed to have a lot of fun making the picture, but she did have a conflict with director Victor Fleming, who, by her own admission, she actually had a huge crush on at the time. There's a scene where Dorothy slaps the cowardly lion, but Judy kept cracking up laughing take after take after take. Fleming got so frustrated he actually slapped the 16-year-old actress in the face. She then returned to the set and nailed the scene in one take, though you can still see her kind of holding back laughter. Fleming was so ashamed of himself, he confided in crew members about how bad he felt for doing so, which Garland overheard. She reassured him that there was no hard feelings and she was fine with what he did, before giving him a kiss on the nose for good measure. Fucking cute bitch. Original filming finished on March the 16th, 1939, but many actors were brought back for reshoots for as late as June that year. The movie was originally 2 hours long but needed to be trimmed down. The general runtime of a film back then was an hour and a half, so a few scenes were snipped shorter or cut out altogether. Some of which leave many lines of dialogue in the final film confusing and nonsensical, since they're referring to a sequence that no longer exists.
I've set a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them.
The famous Over the Rainbow sequence was also originally cut out, as the studio thought it made the Kansas scene too long and would bore the children viewers. They also found it to be too degrading for Judy Garland to sing in a barnyard. Hey, if it's good enough for Jesus! Victor Fleming fought to keep it in, and they won, eventually leading to the song winning an Academy Award, and in 2004 would even be ranked #1 by the AFI for the best movie song of all time. Other content that was deleted involved a love story blossoming between Dorothy and Scarecrow. How old she's supposed to be? I'm not even joking. That's what this line refers to.
I think I'll miss you most of all.
Okay, please? It's quite ironic because Judy Garland's real-life daughter would actually end up marrying Jack Haley's real-life son in 1974. Sorry, Scarecrow, I guess Tin Man's better. An even earlier version of the script even showed Aunt Eminem wanting to murder Toto to punish Dorothy. Bye-bye, childhood. Bye-bye. Yeah, you just go down there. The Hollywood premiere took place on August the 15th, 1939, the New York City premiere on August the 17th, and then released nationally on August 25th. In a genius method of marketing, none of the Kansas scenes were shown in any of the trailers, only the Oz scenes. The beautiful Technicolor landscapes were very new and inventive back then, so the trailers led audiences to believe the entire movie was done that way. Clever bastards! During its initial release, the movie earned a worldwide total of just over $3 million, but due to its overly expensive budget, it actually lost $1.1 million. It wasn't until a re-release in 1949 that it pulled in a further $1.5 million. Frank Nugent called the picture a delightful piece of wonder-working which had the youngsters' eyes shining and brought a quietly amused gleam to the wiser ones of the oldsters. Not since Disney's Snow White has anything quite so fantastic succeeded half so well. He did, however, say, in regards to the special effects, with the best of will and ingenuity, they cannot make a munchkin or a flying monkey that would not still suggest, however vaguely, a singer's midget in a jackdaw masquerade. Nor can they say, without a few betraying jolts and split-screen overlappings, bring down from the sky the great soap bubble in which the Good Witch rides and roll it smoothly into place. Judy Garland's Dorothy is a pert and fresh-faced miss with the wonderlit eyes of a believer in fairy tales, but the bone fantasy is at its best when the Scarecrow, the Woodman, and the Lion are on the move. John C. Flynn from Variety claimed the movie was likely to perform some record-breaking feats of box office magic. Some of the scenic passages are so beautiful in design and composition as to stir audiences by their sheer enfoldment. He also called Garland an appealing figure and the musical numbers gay and bright. Wouldn't be able to say that in 2016. Although, that statement's actually a lot more accurate than you think. The Wizard of Oz actually made a huge impact in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. I am being dead serious. The movie is highly perceived as a metaphor for coming out of the closet. I can actually see it. It actually does make a lot of sense. Think about it. Dorothy is ridiculed by her family, leading to her running away from home in shame. She then ends up in a very homoerotic and camp landscape, meeting up with many bizarre camp characters and dodgy costumes, where she feels more at home, more comfortable, and she can finally be herself. I can't unsee it now. And if you really want to go the extra mile, the evil witch is an uptight conservative woman who bends the law to get her own way. Just stay down there, childhood. Don't even bother trying. Harrison's reports wrote, even though some persons are not interested in films of this type, it is possible that they will be eager to see this picture just for its technical treatment. The performances are good and the incidental music is of considerable aid. Pictures of this caliber bring credit to the industry. Film Daily stated, Leo the Lion is privileged to herald this one with its deepest roar, the one that comes from way down. For seldom, if indeed ever, has the screen been so successful in its approach to fantasy and extravaganza through flesh and blood. This handsomely mounted fairy story in Technicolor with its wealth of humor and homespun philosophy, its stimulus to the imagination, its procession of unforgettable settings, its studding of merry tunes should click solidly at the box office. Russell Maloney from The New Yorker, on the other hand, claimed the film displayed no trace of imagination, good taste or ingenuity, and even called it a stinkeroo. A stinkeroo. This was a real journalist. Otis Ferguson from The New Republican stated, it has dwarves, music, Technicolor, freak characters and Judy Garland. It can't be expected to have a sense of humour as well, and for the light touch of fantasy, it weighs like a pound of fruitcake soaking wet. Roger Ebert listed it as one of his favourite films, claiming, The Wizard of Oz has a wonderful surface of comedy and music, special effects and excitement, but we still watch it 6 decades later because its underlying story penetrates straight to the deepest insecurities of childhood, stirs them and reassures them. Writer Salman Rushdie admitted the movie was his first ever literary influence. His first short story was even titled Over the Rainbow. The San Francisco Chronicle credited Dorothy's arrival to Oz to her departure to the Yellow Brick Road as one of the greatest in cinema history, a masterpiece set design, costuming, choreography, music, lyrics, storytelling, and sheer imagination. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 99% and calls it an absolute masterpiece whose groundbreaking visuals and deft storytelling are still every bit as resonant. The Wizard of Oz is a must-see film for young and old. AFI listed it in their greatest movie quotes with not 1, not 2, but 3 entries.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
Was 99th.
There's no place like home.
Was 23rd, and
Toto, I'm repeating we're not in Kansas anymore.
was 4th, and that's not even mentioning the famous
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
The American Film Institute even went on to list The Wizard of Oz as the #1 best film under the fantasy genre and the 10th best movie ever made overall. Channel 4 put it on the greatest family films of all time, and it's also Billy Burke's favourite movie ever. But she wouldn't be biased whatsoever. This opinion, however, does not go for everyone, as Premiere put it on their list for the 20 most overrated movies of all time, and even Judy Garland herself was disappointed with the film upon release due to the poor commercial success. On Christmas Day in 1950, the movie was dramatised as a 1-hour radio play, even starring Judy Garland reprising her role as Dorothy. It was shown on television for the first time ever on November the 3rd, 1956, and a truly staggering 44 million people tuned in to watch. In 1964, we got a 60-minute animation called Return to Oz, and in 1974, an unofficial sequel, also animated, Journey Back to Oz, starring Judy Garland's real-life daughter, Liza Minnelli. Just a year later, in 1975, we got a stage show called The Wiz, which sounds like what I do every time Lord of the Rings is on. It was an African-American version of the film starring Stephanie Mills, and it actually won some Tony Awards. This play was the inspiration for the series revival, although it did bring upon a very unsuccessful and very shitty Fox Splooge film in 1978 starring Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. film. So I guess you could say it's bad. In 1985, we finally got an official sequel, Return to Oz, starring Fairuza Balk as Dorothy. This movie is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest period of time between films, the sequel taking place 46 years after the original. Don't worry, I'm sure A Bug's Life 2 will take its place. It was based on the novel The Marvelous Land of Oz, released in 1904, and Ozma of Oz in 1907, but it did very poorly at the box office. But you know why? Because it's awesome, and people don't like awesome films. Look at it, the 80s gave no shits. This took one of the happiest and charming, most beloved kids films of all time, made it for kids still, but then turned it into a demonic Marilyn Manson music video scarring children everywhere. And it's awesome. I mean, I watched it as a kid and I turned out okay. Fairuza Balk is an incredible actress, especially for her age. They capitalized on a sequel possibility in the best way imaginable. The sets are absurdly good, the music, the characters. It is easily one of the greatest sequels ever made. Just gonna say it quickly, I think it's better than the original. And one of my favourite movies ever made. Many considered it more faithful to the source material, but it basically bombed. The original book was actually a lot darker than the first movie, even having the Tin Man decapitate people with his axe. Oh, and the slippers were originally silver. Oh, that's it. Film sucks. It didn't follow the book. I mean, to its credit, the film was quite dark in the sense that Scarecrow is holding a fucking revolver. A Wizard of Oz character is packing heat. He's holding a goddamn gun. Stay down there. In 1995, Gregory Maguire published a novel entitled Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, which was turned into a Broadway show called Wicked. Good, because that title was longer than a Stephen King film. The story served as a prequel, the life events of the Wicked Witch before Dorothy shows up in Oz, which is a cool take on things. In 2005, we then got The Muppets Wizard of Oz, because the Muppets are awesome and they have to remake everything. Ashanti was Dorothy, so now I want to fuck Dorothy. Thanks. David Alan Grier as Uncle Henry.
I'm gonna meet David Allen Greer. I'm gonna meet David Allen Greer. You gonna meet David Allen Greer. Guess who I'm gonna meet?
David Alan Greer.
How'd you know that? You must be psychic.
And even Queen Latifah is Aunt Eminem. In 2007, we got a mini-series based on the Tin Man, and not too long after, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice wrote a musical based on the film with the same title, opening in 2011 with Danielle Hope as Dorothy. Tom and Jerry even got a taste with the 2011 movie as Dorothy's protectors, because Tom and Jerry are awesome and they're awesome. And they even got a sequel called Tom and Jerry Back to Oz, released on June the 21st, 2016. Even a reality show entitled Over the Rainbow starring Danielle Wade was a thing in September 2013. After the Wizard was an independent film based on the aftermath of the first movie, released on August the 7th, 2012. And in 2013, we got a prequel called Oz the Great and Powerful, directed by the genius who brought us Spider-Man 3. Fuck you. And starring James Franco, Marla Kunis and Michelle Williams. This one actually was a huge success but received mixed thoughts amongst fans and critics alike. The movie was okay. It had god-awful green screens, even worse CGI effects, but it did have some great ideas, some more subtle and clever foreshadowing, an amazing performance by Kunis, but some nonsensical plot points. And it even rips off characters from Shrek, lines from Batman, set and costume designs from Harry Potter, plot points from Snow White. It's just very mediocre and could have been so much better.
Better have something for Glinda.
His dick!
Oh my, it's very tight in here.
Oh. Well, who needs a childhood anyway? The saga continued on May the 9th, 2014, when Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return was released as a musical animated story of the film. And now we've reached the segment of the video that I like to call things that nobody has the balls to admit, because The Wizard of Oz is absolutely amazing, so everyone turns a blind eye to everything that's wrong with it and they don't want to admit there's anything negative whatsoever. The title needs work. Now, I love this movie. The songs are memorable and we still sing them to this day, from Yellow Brick Road to Over the Rainbow to Ding Dong, My Wife is Dead, Off to See the Wizard, If Only I Had a Heart, If Only I Had a Brain, If Only We Had Bug's Life 2. We've all sang them and it's such an impressive piece for its time. This was 1939. This movie was created when my father was a sperm in my grandfather's nutsack, and it looks more real and magical than some films nowadays. The movie, not my grandfather's nutsack. The sets are gorgeous, the landscape is beautiful to look at, the music is enchanting and the characters are likeable, but I do feel like because of people's love for the film, they turn a blind eye to its problems. For instance, the acting. Hear me out. Right here, Judy Garland is amazing, but this is at the 78-minute mark. She's not unbearable throughout, but she does have some really bad reads, as do the other cast members. And you can't use the whole, it was the 30s style, because King Kong didn't have this problem 6 years earlier. Can you really tell me any of these sound genuine?
I have so got brain.
I have so got acting.
We've got to get away.
We've got to get some acting lessons.
That's our farm.
That's her acting.
What's she doing now?
Probably acting. Maybe I should try.
Don't you think the wizard could help him, too?
Don't you think the wizard could teach him to act too?
I can't run anymore.
I can't act anymore. Not that I could before, but I can't act anymore.
I'd turn back if I were you.
I'd learn to act if I were you.
Why? Don't you see? He's come to take us to Dorothy.
Why? Don't you see? He's come to take us to our acting lessons.
Oh, but anyway, Toto, we're home. Home. And this is my room. And you're all here. And I'm not going to leave here ever, ever again. Because I love you all.
And this is my acting. And I'm never going to try to emote again. And I love you all. I feel bad criticising it because the film was such a big part of my childhood, but I have to call it how I see it. The acting is fake and forced and not believable, which is the entire purpose of acting in the first place. All of this build-up, this intense tornado scene, this absolutely fantastic sequence, and after all of this... Oh. Brilliant.
Do you think if I went with you, this wizard would give me some brains? Do you think if I went with you, this wizard would give me some brains?
How the hell did they not see the witch here? She is easier to see than the irate gamer's boner for James Rolfe. These tree costumes look awful. Okay, I guess any tree costume would look pretty bad, but still. Allow me to ruin this scene for you.
Oh, oil my arms, please. Oil my elbows.
Did that hurt?
No, it feels wonderful. Stuff a mattress with me. Heh.
You sure showed her. Awesome comeback, dude. The Lion's second solo is entirely pointless. No, like, they literally needed to kill time, so I guess it does have a point, but it does absolutely nothing to add to the plot whatsoever. The Tin Man here legit looks absolutely petrifying. Imagine this guy coming after you. Forget Michael Myers, this is the true horror movie villain.
Oh, hurry, please, hurry! The hourglass is almost empty!
But they don't know about the hourglass, so it was completely pointless telling them that. Why would the witch even have her own weakness inside her castle? It makes no sense. There's a nice crew member's hand here as well, pouring the water on her. What a nice guy.
You've always had the power to go back to Kansas.
I have.
Then why didn't you tell her before?
Because she wouldn't have believed me.
Yes, she would. It would have taken 2 seconds to test it, and oh, she's back home. There's literally no reason why she couldn't have just told her that from the start. She would have avoided a life-endangering experience, traumatizing her for life. What a whore. I also feel like the foreshadowing is incredibly forced. I get that you wouldn't notice it the first time you watch it, but these are things that no normal person says ever.
What makes the Sphinx the seventh wonder? Courage.
So he knows what the seventh wonder of the world is, but he doesn't know where Kansas is. Also, the seventh wonder of the world is not the Sphinx, it's actually the Great Pyramid. Wrong on both fronts. In fact, when Scarecrow gets his brain, kind of, he says,
Sum of the square roots of any two sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side.
Now, this is referring to the Pythagorean theorem, which is about right triangles and not isosceles ones. But the statement is incorrect about any triangle, so it's bullshit on all fronts. Just like this.
As for you, my galvanized friend.
Galvanization is a process in which a metal is covered with zinc in order to prevent rusting. Therefore, throughout the entire movie, Tin Man shouldn't rust. But even furthermore, tin doesn't rust. I'm sorry, guys. Tin does not rust. Tin, rust, no. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Now I know I've got a heart, because it's breaking.